We are going to be taking a look at P1-7. It's in metric, and I do want to show some of the techniques for if you start a part in inch and need to convert to metric. So fly this out of the way. There's not any really crazy geometry, so we should be able to go through this. If you haven't been using the templates, now's the time to start. So um, I get in the habit of selecting my part inch, but I know that this is a metric part. Then we're going to open a sketch on the front plane. If I do the click as opposed to the click drag, the thing to keep in mind is that the click is continuous. It will start at the end point of the previous line, where the click drag goes, says if you want to draw another line, draw another line. If you want to do something else, do something else. All right, so we have a line going about that way, and it's about this time that I notice, hey, I'm in 3.179. Usually my metric would be 0 point something if it was really small, or a fairly good sized number. So 3 inches would be about 75 millimeters. All right, so if I go through there and we start doing the rest of the sketch, and I do want to add a couple of dimensions. So, I went right into click drag mode. So my preference. All right, so the click then goes pick the start, pick the end, and then it goes to the next one. And I think I have the rest of the geometry. And what we're watching for is those inference lines. So if I go there, I'm going to get perpendicular. If I'm off of that line, there's the midpoint. If we go back to, let me zoom and mess with the scroll wheel mouse. So zooming up and down where you're at the pointer will act as kind of a pan. So the thing to notice here is that I'm seeing the perpendicular, I'm seeing the inference line. The magenta is the last line that I selected, and in the upper right, the orange is what it's going to be perpendicular to. So as this comes around, that is parallel to the orange line, and that would be perpendicular. Notice the magenta went to orange. That is perpendicular to that line now. And then we can pull the inferences back to horizontal, and I'm looking for the vertical. So a lot of visual clues going on the screen that you need to learn to read and make it kind of a second thought, or when SolidWorks helps you by automatically applying one of those inferences, that you know how to correct for what you're doing. So by hitting the display delete relations, we get a list of all the relations in the sketches. We haven't added any dimensions yet, so we will compare that. So when I add the first dimension, I see the inch, I know that I'm in metric, I can type in 40 millimeters, mm. There's also a place to pick the units, but usually I just type it in. So we go ahead and accept it. It returns the 1.57 inches. And I know that I need to switch over to metric. So we go to millimeters, grams, and seconds. It kicks me out of the sketch to make the transition. And now it has the 40 millimeters. So let's say we were in inches and I made this, I typed in the 40 as opposed to doing the 40 millimeters. And if I change that to 40 inches, that gets really big, right? 1,000 and a little over a meter. So I want to look at the display delete. There is the distance relation. And if I had a bunch of those applied already, I could delete all of them together, or we just go back and double click and change. But just like that one changed, there's some strange things that can happen, and geometry gets inverted, kind of goes crazy, wonky sometimes. So I'm probably better off, if it's not a super complicated, to delete the dimensions and reapply them. I'm still hesitant to tell you to start over. You've gotten this far, learn from, find a way to work through it. All right, so our next dimensions are going to be 100, and we have 60 on the bottom, right? And that takes care of the linear. All right, and then we're going to switch over from selecting objects to selecting between two objects. Since there's not a direct line there, I can pick an object and pick an object. So in my hierarchy, the object itself, and then between two objects, unless desirable, in my opinion, is to go between points. So let's see what happens if we go with the 20 millimeter. This one shouldn't present too much of a problem. It's a smart dimension. I still think it's an easier target to pick the line. And if we go close to the line, we're going to get the linear. If we go underneath, we're going to get horizontal. But watch what happens when I go ahead and click that. I get a make driven dimension driven. 60 and 40 equals 100, so it already has all the information it needs. If I wanted to leave it there, I would make it driven. And notice that its extension line is a lighter gray. And if I try to edit, it says that this driven dimension can't be changed. If I wanted to change it, I would go to 50, and that one would go to 50. All right, so it doesn't, unless you want it to act as a kind of reference, the driven dimension doesn't do a whole lot for you. All right, so I'm going to stay with the object, pull off to the side for vertical, and go to 20 millimeters. Between the two objects is 60. So my vertical, go back to an object, and so try different things. Find out what works. One of the things with the points, and depending on how you're managing geometry, points also allow for an orbit, which can be a little bit strange. All right, so I want to introduce a separate feature, the cut feature. But if you went ahead and drew the three circles, that's fine. That's a perfectly valid method. So let's go ahead and extrude to the 5 millimeters. And we'll go ahead and hit OK. All right, so any face now that I select on, let's just use that as an example, is going to be able to start a new sketch. So that face, any planar face that we have, as well as the front, top, and right plane, are going to still be valid as well. So I pick on the face, I tell it that I want to start a sketch. I go into the circle, and with the circles, click, and click drag. Look pretty much the same. All right, so since we're in its own sketch, and I have the three circles, I want to make these equal. We can go ahead and put a few dimensions on it, but the window pick is if I am window crossing. All right, so anything that goes inside of the window from left to right is going to be selected. Window crossing from right to left, anything that is inside or the box crosses over is going to be selected. So a lot of times, just by habit, I'll go right to left unless I'm really thinking that I just want to get a few of those items. All right, so since my context box disappeared, I'm going to come over to the properties, select the equal, go into the smart dimension, and we can put the two values, so 20. Now, because this has a linear component, a horizontal component, this wouldn't necessarily rotate. So I do want to talk a minute about the pivot. So if I do between the points as opposed to the circles, and there's another reason that we'll address here in a second that I want to go between the perimeters of the circles. But at this point, well, we still have a little bit of movement that way, but we can have some strange movement if we don't add the relations. So if I go 20, and let's go with the 75. And from a vertical component, let's see, we had 30 from there. All right, and we haven't, circles are still in blue, so that tells me there's something left to do. And we need to go ahead and put the 20 millimeters on the group. All right, so the last circle is still in blue because it is able to orbit. And that's kind of to be expected. We didn't come off of the baseline or off of the top. So I'm going to left click and hit delete, and that's going to remove the relation because I want to do one more type. So between the points can be vertical, and that's going to position it. And then if we click on the perimeter, that's going to give us an additional set of parameters. So I can go first arc condition minimum, second arc condition maximum, and have those in. So even if you only use those 1 in 100 times on your arc, it is handy to have that min-max. So where that comes into play is I'm given a part that broke and we tried to buy a replacement part, or I want to 3D print it. I take my calipers and I measure between these two circles and I measure the diameters of the circles. I can enter those values directly by going to the min conditions or to the max conditions. All right, so we have the geometry in place. Now instead of a boss extrude, this is going to be an extruded cut. And I can start looking at in conditions. So blind, if I made this 5 millimeters or left this 5 millimeters, it would stay 5 millimeters even if I update the thickness. So we're always making revisions and going through iterations of the design. So by saying through all or up to next, through all says if there were 20 of these, it would find all of them and go through every one. Up to next says I would be wanting the next end condition, this back face, and stop there. And even if there's 20 of them, that's as far as it goes. Okay, so we can go ahead and accept that. And then making changes to our geometry. So if I double click on the extrude, the feature, I will see all of the dimensions. And notice the extension lines for the 5 millimeter are in blue. All the rest of the extension lines, except for the driven, are in black. And that is something then that I can go, I want it to be 10 millimeters. Well, nothing really happens because I have to rebuild it. So we rebuild it, it changes thickness. Decide I really didn't want that, I can hit Control-Z. And notice that the holes find that in condition as opposed to becoming pockets. All right, so we'll go ahead and end the video here and save with our P1-7. And since I did a previous example, I'll add a little notation there.